morning and welcome to Switch Forum webinar. If you're here, you see a presentation of you're in the right place. I have a few introduction slides to do. My name's Duncan Simpson. I am the lead with the Education, Training and Competence Committee, which will seem a bit strange for a health and safety subject. But that's because Jim Brown from Bin Group gives us apologies today in terms of chairing. He has a 3-line whip on a couple of meetings today, so asked if I would fill in for him. And I think it's because he knows that it's more fun for me to interrogate Gordon than it is for him to do it. So that's going to be my task for today. Let me go on to the next slide, please. So if you haven't already, could you please mute, and that allows everyone to hear what Gordon's got to say and see the slide clearly. And the session is being recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded for posterity and put onto the Switch Forum website, now's the time to blank yourself out and disappear. Otherwise, you're going to be recorded and you don't get paid any copyright for that. And if you have any questions, could you pop them into the chat bar? You'll see the chat function at the top of your screen. Pop them in there. And once Gordon's finished, we'll cover off all of your questions, whether about the subject that Gordon's talking about or any questions you have about the Switch Forum. But if we could go on to the next slide, please. So if you don't know already, the Switch Forum is a multi-partner forum that was made up from a range of stakeholder organizations from across the sector, across the resource management industry. And the idea was to provide leadership by working collaboratively on issues to do with health and safety, but also to do with training, learning, competence, and to promote a safe and healthy industry that supports people throughout their careers and supports them with good practice, advice, guidance, and raising awareness of issues to do with health and safety in the sector. If you want to work with us, it's a voluntary organisation. We're always looking for volunteers to speak about subjects they're interested in, they have experience of. If you want to work on any of our working groups, we are always looking for people to help. Or if you'd like to write an article about a subject you think is important that's not being talked about, then please contact us and do that. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So here are a number of the organisations that we work with. CIWM, representing individuals in the industry as the professional body. They have a range of services they can help you with your career. RMAS, representing SMEs in the sector. And of course, other important organisations such as the Health and Safety Executive, Scottish Government, SEPA, Zero Waste, the ESA, EU Skills, ROSPA, and a large number of other individuals and organisations who give their time to us very generously to help us organise the information, the support and the assets that we hand over to yourselves. It's easy to join, it's free to join. If we go on to the next slide, please, Jazz. All you have to do is pop onto the website and stick in your name and your email address, and you automatically will be then channeled information from the Switch Forum and connected with everyone else that's in the network. And if there's someone else you think would benefit from this, new to the sector, new to a role, just simply wanting other information, then please encourage them to do so and get them to join. We're not for profit. In fact, we're a charity, and we are dependent upon financial contributions from third parties, as well as goodwill support from others, such as Gordon, who puts a power of effort into helping Jim in the Health and Safety Working Group. So if we could pop on to the next slide, please. Here we are. This is the webinar we're going to be talking about today. I'll introduce Gordon for you. So Gordon Whiteford is probably a well-known face within the industry. The best thing about Gordon, in my opinion, is that he has a great deal of operational and logistics experience. And at the moment, he works for Lomac Alloys Limited, and he's their operations and logistics manager. Gordon is a COTC holder. He's a chartered member of CIWM. He's trained in advanced leadership, and he has been a member of the Switch Forum Health and Safety Group since we were inaugurated a number of years ago. He has a lot of practical experience and a lot of knowledge in this area, and there's nothing better than hearing from someone involved in these issues right at the coalface. He's very kindly put a presentation together today to cover the issue about machinery safety, maintenance, and the issues related to that. While he pops his slides on, because he's going to run them from his side of the screen, let me tell you just a short introduction. So, looking at some WISH guidance information recently, statistic that stood out to me was that prior to 2000, there were no incidents of injury or fatalities recorded in this area of concern. But as the sector has moved forward in terms of processing materials, separating materials, cleaning up materials, and that equipment becoming more sophisticated, more complex, and more challenging to operate with on a daily basis, the number of accidents has increased, and now we have somewhere in the region of 3 fatalities a year related to this subject area. So it is an extremely important area. It can be a complex area to manage because of the nature of the industry and the nature of the equipment. And I really welcome Gordon's views today on taking us through his.
You're on mute, Duncan. Duncan, you've gone into mute.
Apologies.
That
must have been wishing there for me to be muted, Gordon. That was what made that happen. So, without further ado, I will mute myself again, switch off my camera, and hand over to you. Anyone got any questions, pop them into the chat, and I'll cover them off with Gordon once we get to the end of his presentation. He has to shoot off early because he's been managing short staff, change in management, and a number of other issues. And he's also been not very well. So let's give Gordon the floor, let him crack on, and we'll take questions at the end. But thanks very much, Gordon, and over to you.
Aye, thanks for that, Duncan. I think first of all what I'll do is I'll make an apology in case I start any coughing and spluttering, because like Duncan, I've been struggling quite a bit with a strange cold for the last week. I'll also apologise for any IT mistakes that I make going through this, and quite sure Heather will be there to help us jump in. First, I'd just like to say thanks to Switch for giving us a chance to talk through this subject. As Duncan said there, a bit of experience for myself, and I'll cover that in an introduction just shortly. But looking into this presentation, I was just saying to Duncan earlier, I found it quite different to any presentation before, because when you think about maintenance, you straight away think about fitters and you think about repair jobs. Actually, I've split the presentation into two kind of halves, because what we find is that the operator is where it all starts. So they're very closely linked to how the machines operate it with plant safety, that then carries on through to maintenance and regular safety checks, to ensure that should anything go wrong at the end of the day, as an operator and as a business, we've done everything we could do and covered our bases. Unfortunately, following on for Amanda's slide that we heard last month, that it's a serious industry that we're in for, unfortunately, serious injury and fatalities, because these machines, they're not small, and humans and the type of machinery that we've got don't tend to mix too great. So unfortunately, we need to be in the best foot forward every time. So what I'll do is I'll take you through this. There's a short video on it as well. We'll let the video run through, and I'll cover as much as I can. It's a broad subject, so I've tried not to delve into too deep of it service and schedules and the specifics of that, but we'll cover each wee bit of that, and then importance of it and exactly just what my opinions of it through the 20-year experience that I've had, particularly in the waste industry, of trying to get the safety side of maintenance sorted out. So Duncan covered a bit of my own background there as well. Recently, I've just went and done the NEBOSH General Certificate as well, which I think it's been great for myself, and it's been great for Lowmark here as well. To get the support for the company to push on, and that was exceptional for me, because I've been wanting to do it for a long time. It kind of underpinned a lot of the things that we probably know about, but it puts a certain slant on it just to the seriousness and the outcomes for the business, and we'll cover a wee bit of that later as well. A short bit about Lowmark. Most of you will know who we are. We're based in Ayrshire, down in Irvine here. We've got sites in Ayr and Irvine, predominantly working in the southwest of Scotland. It's a family business. This year, family business has been operating for 50 years. Started off in the scrap materials, and moving into waste and recycling, to being in 2023 probably a leading waste processor in the West Coast, and in collection as well. And I'll cover a wee bit about what we've got here. I'm going to cover a wee bit about guidances and legislations, but I'm not going to bore everybody to tears, because we should all be fully aware of what they are. Talk a wee bit about machinery safety from an operator's point of view, and that will bring us on to a short video that I've got to show. Could I just ask that everybody checks their own mute? I'm getting a bit of a bounce back coming through. If you could just check that for us. I'll show a short video, and then I'll talk a wee bit about the maintenance. I'm still getting bounce back. If somebody could check their mute, please. We've got a short video, as I say, talk a wee bit about the maintenance and machinery and procedures and systems and learnings that we've had here at Lowmark and myself through that experience, and then a bit about the true cost of failure and the failure today, any maintenance work that's required. So the interesting bit and the important bit under the Health and Safety at Work Act, etc., 1974, duty holders and duties is a bit that we all need to focus on there. We all have, as an operator of a machine, as a member of staff, and as an employer, we all have duties to each other, but it is the employer's duty to ensure that equipment is safe and fit for purpose. Fit for purpose is something we'll talk about later on in the slides, because I think that's where we make a lot of mistake. That means we end up with a requirement to over maintain, putting people at risk where they don't need to be. We've also got the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999, which focus more on the kind of RAMs and the risk assessments, method statements and procedures. And I don't know about you guys, but we still have well-known reputable companies coming in to carry out maintenance without any paperwork. They get frustrated when you ask them to do an induction. That's how simple this is. We're still in an era where the culture of the past is still here. Health and safety policy documents for the company as well. So in there, we need to ensure that as a company that we've got our own health and safety policy documents laid out and set out from the owner or the director of the business, and laying that right across the staff. One of the findings that I've had in experience is that management don't even know and understand enough of the policies and the procedures that are in place. So how then can we expect them to manage that out on site? So it's about communication again. I'll talk about it coming up. Competence. This is the big one. When we talk about competence, take a moment and think to yourself what that means to you. It will probably mean, are the people that work in an area competent to do so? When we think about the fitting teams or maintenance or mechanics coming on site, are they competent to do what they do? How do we know? How do we know without knowing the company, without knowing their procedures, and without knowing that they've had the relevant training? Competence is training, skills, experience and knowledge, as we all know. If they don't have that, you're putting yourself and that person at massive risk, and the company. I've put in there about training apprenticeships. Duncan and I just spoke earlier as well. We have a serious issue enticing youth, keeping youth, employment, keeping staff, and it's not just a youth issue. We are going to all sectors now to try and get staff into the waste industry, which is proven quite challenging again for some reason, and I know that's a common problem. We're governed heavily by regulation, so we all know that we've got the safety side, the VOSA side, the SEPA side, the authorities, environmental health. We have to deal with quite a lot of fingers pointing in an industry. And then you have to break that down further, because every piece of equipment that you've got is covered under the pure regs. If you've got lifting equipment and lifting machinery, chains and slings, those are all covered under the LOLA regulations, and we should all be up with these. But the problem we find is when you bring in maintenance contractors, again, who are reputable, they are still unawares to ladder inspections, use of safety ladders on sites, their own testing of their own equipment sometimes isn't there in place prior to the starting of a job. They're just so used to turning up, cracking on, getting the job done, because time's money, and that's where the mistakes get made. I've stuck this slide in here, Lomax machinery. Know that anybody in here needs to see a picture of a grab, or a picture of a truck, or a picture of a shredder. There's 2 or 3 purposes to these pictures being here. Basically, what I'm trying to show here is the vast array that we have is a relatively small family business of plant and machinery, of different types of operating training, of different types of maintenance requirements. And the key thing for me is the size and scale of everything. There is nothing in any of the 4 pictures that wouldn't do you serious harm if you tried to mix. Us humans don't mix too great with 30 and 40 ton of steel, to be honest. In the picture, you'll see the shredder there. We have severe maintenance on shredders, and it's the one thing that scares me the most, because if it's not done right, there's no usually an injury comes out of it, unfortunately. The other picture that I've got there, quite difficult to make out with the sizing of them, but that was something I'll talk about in a wee bit. It's load all machines. So we talk about the maintenance, we talk about the operation, we talk about the operator. But what we're quite bad for, I've found in history, is no getting the procurement right. So going and looking at load alls recently, I've just learned that you get 2 different types for different. We know about weights, we know about sizes, we know about heights, but actually learning that they put out 2 different machines, JCB, and one's for waste specifics, and that's the reason, is because of the force and the wear and certain components and hinges and brackets and pins. Buying the wrong machine means your maintenance is really heightened compared to buying the correct machine, so we'll talk about that as well. As you can see there at Lomax there, we have quite an array of plant and vehicles. We've got process machinery. Process machinery, as we all know, means motors, electricity. It means rollers, nip points, carding. It means belts, conveyor belts. And unfortunately, when process lines are put in, I don't really think anybody designs in at that stage the maintenance, because every time you need a belt change, that turns into a massive operation, which we'll all have experienced at some point. Getting guys in to fit belts, you realise that they're there to do a job and go again, and they'll do it at whatever is easiest route. We need to, as managers, make sure that we don't allow that to happen. We need to, as site supervisors, make sure we don't allow that to happen, because the risk factor there, working at height, or the various items there are quite clear. Machinery safety. So who's actually covered under machinery safety as a bracket? Who do we actually put in that remit? It's everybody within the site. Unfortunately, in the waste industry, we've quite a lot of pedestrians mixing. We have a plant. We can work in traffic management plans. We can put up segregation barriers. We can do all the great things that we try and put in place, but we still have that exposure, unfortunately, because of the nature of what we do, pulling material for a pile of waste, or something that's been tipped that shouldn't have been, or there's various reasons that we're all aware of there. Pedestrians been struck by moving plants. One of the big things with machinery safety, and the video actually incorporates that as well, that I'm going to show. Crushing and entrapment is one of the bigger issues that we find with the process lines. Something to be very aware of is the OEM, the manufacturer's requirement and specification for garden is very, very different to us as an end user. To the standard of about 35 grand for me once when buying a plant. Bought the plant, they designed the plant, walkways, garden, you name it, this thing was covered. Once it was in, an HSE inspection pointed at the issues with garden. Unfortunately, as it comes from the manufacturer and the provider, they've got a different set of rules as to standards for garden. You as the end user, it's on you. You cannot have anywhere where somebody can put a hand in. So we talk about automated systems and automated lock-offs later. We get burns, we can have plant tipping, we can have falls for height accessing plants. Some of them is access through ladders, moving parts capable of entrapment and catching things. The risk run about plant in the waste industry, as we all know, is high. It's how do we reduce that as far as reasonably practicable and getting it so that we prevent injury as much as possible. But there's always the human element. The cause of accidents that I have experienced myself, dare I say it, there's a human factor to everything to do with plant. Whether it's repairing it, maintenancing, greasing, whether it's a walk round check, slips and trips, housekeeping, or whether it's been the operation and the operator. The tendency to think someone knows best, or the tendency to think that they'll cut 5 minutes off a job because it makes it easier for everybody and helps everybody, is exactly where it goes. Without getting into too much detail, in the past in Lowmark there was a serious injury, and it was a supervisor, well knowledgeable, well experienced, knew exactly what he was doing, and tried to save a wee bit of downtime, tried to cut a few corners, and it resulted in a complete loss of an arm. So you can imagine the impact, like Amanda said a month ago, on everybody working with the person and the person for the rest of his life. No a nice situation at all for anybody involved, and a life-changing experience for everybody as well as the injured person. So it tends to come from somebody trying to do the right thing, trying to help, trying to save a bit of money, trying to push on. We get a lot of accidents because of failure to understand the surrounding environment. So understanding where you are, what's in the close vicinity, what the ground levels are like, overhead cables, these sort of things. We need to understand what's happening with that. Sticking to risk assessments and method statements, safe systems of work. We all put these in place. We sit in classrooms, we walk around the machine, we get everybody to understand it, and these people are trained on that bit of machinery, whether it be external training and certificate it to blue and go to pink ticket level, or whether it's internal, they're all trained, but there's always that element of not following the procedure, or they know best, and that's where we find that the issues come from. It then puts the onus on the supervisors, charge hands, and managers on site to continually bang that drum, whether it's running about a maintenance contractor or an operator. I'm going to play the video now. Now, it's quite a hard-hitting video. It's an old video. It's a Network Rail video. So you might ask why Network Rail. It's the best video I've came across in my experience of these types of training. It's 4.5, 5 minutes long. It's worth a watch, and in particular, what I would like everybody to pay attention to is just about everything that's written in that list on that last slide, because it shows poor communication, it shows poor planning, it shows poor traffic management, if you like, control. It shows rushing the job. It shows poor tooling, poor preparation. One of the biggest factors to a maintenance injury that we come across is it's always reactive, it's always a panic, and production has stopped. And that's a cultural thing that has to change within any organisation to do preventative maintenance first, but when you do get that breakdown, allow adequate time for a safe repair. I'll play this video and let everybody get a bit of a chance to run through this with their own thoughts. It is a bit hard hitting, and I'll let you just sit and watch through that for the points discussed there. So if you just take a minute on that video, just to think of a few things. For me, what catches me there is it's the dramatic music and when the incident actually happens. Or the dramatic music, the commotions, to then the birds whistling at the end and the calming of the reality of what's just happened. I've saw that video a few times now, and I've got to say it kind of turns my stomach every time. And I think it does it because I think everything that I see in that video, we see, not on a daily basis, hopefully, but we see it within our own industry. If you just think about the time, the planning for the job, live lines, poor segregation, poor pre-planning, poor tools and preparation, doesn't have the tools in the right area, poor comms, no communication, wrong tools possibly when you had to go back and get a different tool, safe zones, mobile phones in a live working area, something we see too often, and the amount of noise around about it. If you go through that list, it is just simply the waste industry. It's just the same thing as what we see. We carry on live repairs, we get things done while others are still working, because we're in a business to make money, we can't afford to stop, but to provide that safe area has got to be key. So when it comes to maintenance and moving on a bit for the operator on his side, and obviously the operator's in charge of the machine, he's in charge of the safety of the operation of the machine, which entails then his defect system, his pre-start check system. It's up to him to raise awareness of anything with that machine, over and above the services, the 250 hours, the 500 hours, the 6 weekly, the quarterly, whatever it is that we plan to do. Moving on a wee bit away from that video and into some of the things that I think we commonly forget about in the waste industry in terms of maintenance. So we can talk about trucks, we can talk about plant, we can talk about the schedules that the manufacturers send us that we all have to adhere to. But what about things like the forgotten equipments? By that, what I talk about is the bucket on the machine. Has anybody checked the bucket to see about wear and tear, fatigue, welds, structural points? What about skips? Switched in a massive exercise right at the origins of setting up Switch, to be honest, run about the safe repairs and how to weld and where to weld and the structural pros and cons of welding in the wrong places or the right places. But we forget about all these things. These are the things that will cause major safety issues. The right skip, the wrong skip, the driver being aware of that. Then the maintenance of the skip. Because again, we all think about we're processing plant at £4 million, or truck at £150,000. What about the wheelie bin that's got the dodgy wheel on it, that the guy then has to pull up the street? He then ends up with an injury to the back because we don't look after that particular piece of working equipment, if you like. If you look at the pictures here, the locking mechanisms and the rolling off skip. And the reason I focus on rolling offs, we have 30 trucks here, and I'll cover a bit about that, but predominantly the collections is the one where we see some of our injuries and our ongoing concerns around about poor operation for the driver or the customer even, and then actually the maintenance. If you look at the picture on the right, a common thing to see on skips, it's all great when we get deliveries of new bins and new skips and we send all these out to customers, but we still have to operate with a fleet suffice to service the customer's needs, and sometimes that means we use skips that are out of serviceable condition. I don't mean we at Lomac, I mean it happens. Some comments in there that really hit home for me when I'm looking at anything, hitting home with the best laid plans and all that. We all try to do our best to put the plans in place. With maintenance in place, with training in place, things still happen. Metal fatigue still happens. There's been a recent fatality at the Prestwick Airport there. I know someone that was there at the time, without going into any detail of it, a working at height incident round about possibly a bit of failure and a bit of equipment. It happens all too often. It's a life lost again. We can try our best with procedures and maintenance and getting things in place, but it's the human error that's probably the worrying part for us all. Costs of maintenance, costs of poor maintenance. If proactive maintenance is something that's hard to implement. One of the things that I've implemented here is quarterly checks, safety checks and electrical checks on the process line that we've got here, because process lines kind of run to the breakdown and then we all get into a panic about production, and then we have to hurry on the maintenance, hurry on the spares, which is a totally different subject. To get any spares within a 3-week window to a 3-month window now, you're doing better than we are. But we forget about these things, so we send the truck in for a 6-weekly check because our boss had told us to, or 4 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever your undertakings are in your license. But what about, and the plant comes in at 250 or 500 because that's what the manufacturer tells you. But when you get conveyor belts and motors and small generators and things, they tend to be kind of left and forgotten. So we've implemented quarterly health checks on these. Proactive maintenance is massive because you kind of hope to catch things before it catches you out at the worst time, because that's when it breaks down. Then as management, you tend to unfortunately rush that repair. You're chasing the maintenance guy, you're pushing the sector all the time, you're pushing your staff, there's frustrations. It leads to a poor situation with regards to safety around about that individual repair. So it's much better to be planned and put into process. At the end of the day, the repair, if you know about it, torn belt, you leave a torn belt, you let it run, it eventually breaks. That repair then becomes an emergency repair and it becomes an absolute nightmare. Everything's time constraint and it's money. When the belt was damaged initially, getting a small repair on it might have been all needed. So planning that in and getting that done is a kind of forward thinking. Production and downtime is massive to everybody. We're in a business to make money, and that's what we're here for. Then you get into the investigations, the injuries, the claims, the efforts behind it, HSE's involvement, court actions, prosecutions. Anything that comes as a result of poor planned maintenance effort or poor operation of plant results in any of that can be damning to the business and its reputation. Simple steps that I've found to help prevent poor maintenance. One of the things that I did here and in my previous role is I tried to implement the undertakings of the operator's license into our plant and mobile plant. We all have a massive tendency to forget about fixed plant, belts, conveyors, mobile plants. As I say, if you buy a new bit of plant, you put it in a repairs and maintenance contract, you do the same with a truck. Why not replicate that standard into every other bit of plant and working equipment that you've got on the site, whether it be a skip, whether it be a bucket, whether it be a wheelie bin. Let's get the checks, the defect systems, the nil defect systems. So the driver or the operator is recording and documenting it and reporting it into the office. Then you can be proactive in that repair. Visual checks are massive. If everybody would just stop and take 5 minutes before they commence any work, whether it be operation or repair, servicing, anything, know their surroundings, know what it is the job is there today. Make sure somebody else knows that's what they're there today. But greasing and lubrication, service intervals, housekeeping is massive. One of the critical things that causes most of the downtime. Defect reporting and management is a must, I think, for every bit of working equipment, as I said, not just a truck because we're told to. Time management. I think as managers, I think I'm guilty as myself. When something happens, it's a panic. We need to get it resolved. The whole situation needs to be calmed down, planned out, discussed, inductions carried out, RAMs received for the maintenance contractor. Supervisors, managers, charge hands all brought in and discussed with the maintenance contractor exactly what they're going to be doing. Permits to work are a massive thing. Anybody know using permits to work whenever somebody has to come in and do a bit of welding or a bit of maintenance or a bit of shutdown? You're kind of leaving yourself open to an open area, and we go back to the video again where there can be a bit more segregation and seclusion and letting the repair be done safely. Managing that time and allowing that time can be quite difficult for managers and directors and owners of a business because, again, it comes back to the profitability side. Preventative maintenance, proactive maintenance is key. It's difficult to implement because you're trying to spend a lot of money to get things to a standard before you move forward to show the benefits. It's a budgeting thing. it's quite difficult, but it definitely serves its purpose. Looking after the plant's key. Don't have the breakdowns, and then you don't have the maintenance contractor, then you don't have a subcontractor who needs to be managed different for your own guys in certain ways. Exclusion zones, as I've covered, any repair works, any hot works, any permitting works, anything that you can seclude away for the working area helps with the safety of that. And these are where my own experience has shown me that we kind of fail a wee bit at times in the past, just allowing maintenance guys to kind of mingle into the operation and carry out repairs in a live environment. It's a no-go. Lock-off procedures, one of the biggest, most crucial things you'll do in any of the type of processing plant that we've got, anything with a stored energy. Anybody that doesn't understand stored energy when they come to work on any kind of hydraulic equipment, balers, wrappers, and electrical equipment like process lines, is putting ourselves at massive risk by entering into any kind of areas where it's difficult access. So in the past, I know of hoppers being worked on for a batching plant, and then when the hopper was repaired, it opened. It was expected that it would actually close, so the preventative measures were put in place to stop it closing, but it actually opened, and unfortunately somebody lost their life there again. So it's understanding and having again back to that knowledge and understanding of the product that the person's going to work on. Don't send a plumber to wire up a house. It's going to end in disaster. Vice versa. Horses for courses, I suppose they say. Prevention. People, attitudes and behaviours are where we're left wide open. Procedures, inductions, RAMs, risk assessments, safe systems of work, safe access and egress are all crucial to any maintenance work that you're going to do, because it's usually the access to the broken down part that can cause the problem. Pre-start defect sheets. It's a must for every single bit of working equipment that you've got to take control and to take management of that. Systems like lock-off procedures, automated, manual, and actually getting the use of that, getting guys to actually work with that and take the extra time to do the paperwork, to do the permit to work, to do the lock-off procedure, and to take the padlock and lock things off. It can be the difference between life and death, and that's how easy it is to explain that. The communication channels is something that a lot of people fail in. It needs to come both ways. We need to take on board what the workers, what the staff, what the guys in the actual job are telling us, and take that on board when you're replicating the paperwork to send back out, so that what you're actually sending out is applicable and feasible. They can actually do the job to the standard that you're setting. Equipment, making sure that it's fit for purpose. I covered that earlier. I've seen quite a few occasions where a smaller machine's been bought when the bigger machine would have made it easy. The smaller machines tip because they're lifting too heavy a load. Shovels been bought because it was a cheap price for that model. Happens quite a lot. Leads you right into a false illusion. You end up with massive costs and maintenance because it literally tears itself to pieces. Service plans for the manufacturer or from the truck for your operator's license, getting a plan in place of how you're going to look after everything. I've recently just implemented a wheelie bin check sheet. It's something that's the simplest of things, but it's proven. It's time and time again. We're sending bins out that probably only fit for purpose, causes problems with the customer, causes problems with the person that's to try and empty the bin. Sending out the right bin with the right defects repaired on it and the right maintenance been applied to something as simple as a wheelie bin makes such a difference, and it makes it safe. The biggest thing for me, for anybody to take away, is encouraging people to step back. Step back for the job. Once you've got your paperwork, once you've got your procedures, once you've had your induction, and you're actually physically standing next to the bit of kit that's to be maintained, whether it's welding or burning or servicing, step back, take 5 minutes and look at the job to make sure that everything's aligned, the process is aligned to what they're thinking, to the paperwork, to how it's actually going to go, and then stop when something's not suitable. The amount of times that people have trapped fingers, broken hands, especially working with hydraulics and hoses and stuff where it's in tight areas, when they could just have stepped back, stopped, removed a couple of more items of the machine and gave themselves much clearer access. It's this trying to rush. Just taking time. Take that 5 minutes and step back. And I've just put up a couple of links there just for some sites run about plant guidance. HSE's get documentation there on mobile plant. We focus on mobile plant. You can apply it to fixed plant. You can apply your operator's licence undertakings to fixed plant and mobile plant in certain elements, and it gives you quite a tight proactive maintenance. I've got on there about the pure regs as well. It's all there online to have a look at, but it's the communication between everybody involved that will make the difference. Any questions, Duncan?
Thanks, Gordon. That was brilliant. It's such a massive area and so much variation across all the aspects you can find in any operation or any piece of kit. Does anyone have any questions for Gordon? There's nothing in the chat at the moment. If not, I mean, I have one, which is I find it really interesting, your point that you bring out about that kind of false economy of this is the bit of kit that's available and it's at a lower price, so I'll buy that, and then you find out it's not fit for purpose, or it's not fit for the material and the activity that you want to put it through. Or I've seen plant that costs hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not millions of pounds, that they press the button, commission it, start it, and just run it until it falls apart.
Yeah.
And it just seems such a false economy to me, to allow that to happen, both from the point of view of the cost to the business, but the cost to the individuals trying to cope with it. And I mean, I'm guessing at the moment that the pressure on that is higher because, as you say, it's hard to get spare parts. So the temptation is to say, well, we'll fudge it, and rather than wait 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 months, we'll try and find a like for like or a plaster band fix, you know. How much of an issue do you think that is at the moment, Gordon?
It's huge. I have never experienced, I've been 20 years plus in operations, I've never experienced anything like it. To give you a simple example, we have one of the best, we've got 2 shredders on site. I'll not say any names because it's getting messy. Probably one of the best that's in the market. It's been sitting parked up for, let's just say, far too long. And now I'm waiting on parts coming from Memphis for a German machine. The issue that I'm having there is we've got other shredders, we're still processing, we're still managing it, is the frustration within the men that's working with that. Every time they come to repair it, every time they tell us they're coming and they don't repair it, every time the wrong parts have been sent, it's been diabolical, to say the least. But the guys, we're having to try and calm the guys down because they just want to work. Guys are just want to get processed and do what they're here to do. Whilst that's happening, there's pressures running about the commercials. I think it's a massive issue, Duncan, and I think what I see potentially happening, and I have seen it in the past, is that you substitute with the wrong item then. So to give you an example of that, you buy a load all and you put a massive bucket on it because that's what everybody in the waste industry wants to do. We want the biggest bucket that you can buy, irrespective of whether it should actually be fitted to that machine or not. The problem with that is if you're loading paper and cardboard, and that telehandler with that big 5 cube bucket's awesome, it's great. But then you realise the next week for the commercial team that you've won a small soil and rubble contract, and your guy thinks that he can load a tipper and 2 buckets with it because he's got a 5 cube bucket full of soil and rubble now. It's that training, that understanding, and that you leave yourself wide open by applying the wrong appliance to the job. And we've been forced into doing that through lack of availability of fitters, lack of availability of parts and machinery. We're running older machinery now as an industry because it's not available. Try and buy a Volvo truck just now, it's 18 months.
Yeah. And I mean, again, that's kind of in a way frustrated by policy because a whole load of people are saying, I'm waiting to see what the policy on this is going to be, what the material is going to be. So I'll hang off and hang off buying that until I know what the business's needs are going forward. But the danger is you end up running plant that should have been taken out of commission quite some time ago.
Yeah.
So can I ask you a bit
We're in a
about, obviously coming from an area where I've seen a lot of MRFs, and both the industrial MRF through to, you know, MRFs that originally put in many years ago to kind of state-of-the-art ones, and they all have conveyors, and you've talked about conveyors being a nightmare. My experience of them is they have so many moving parts in them underneath that the plastic gets caught up in them, bits of rope gets caught up in them, bits of metal gets caught up in them.
Yeah.
They get blockages, they get overthrow, they throw off dust and bioaerosols and all sorts. And the screening for that can be massively helpful in stopping that capturing of material happening. And the first point of design can be really helpful in that. But if you don't maintain it and you don't think about that right at the very beginning, the chances of fire, the chances of traps, the chances of people putting their hands and fingers into bits that they can get in, or climbing out over the top to try to get rid of a blockage. I mean, I think you've said it, it's like good planning, good buying, good preparation, thinking about the tasks before you need to actually do them, and then what the role of the individual would be and the role of the equipment. Do you see this getting better or worse, or do you see technology helping us? What do you think is going to make the difference, Gordon?
Personally, the issue I see is that the designs come from a company that's trying to sell you something.
Okay,
that's the first issue. So it's as viable as they can make it to win that bid, if you like, to get you the sale.
Yeah.
You then need to look to see where the handrails are, where the walkways are, where the nip points are. That then adds the price back in, so you don't know where you were then against pricing because you're no like for like. I don't think it's getting better because I think the technology is getting more complex.
Yeah.
Which means I have a bit of kit as well that's done just now, and I flew to guys in from Germany last week to basically tell me that they can't see anything wrong with it at a massive cost. Nobody else can work in this bit of kit equipment. So, and I can only speak for Lomac here, Duncan. The names that's in most of the machinery that are here are probably the leading in the field. So Steinhardt and Triverco and all the bigger names. It doesn't. It helps to a degree. When everything's okay, it's okay. When you've got a problem that you need help with, we're back to this issue a bit prolonging again parts. But the issue I see, Duncan, is it's in the communication to the staff to get them to understand. Our process line, if we get a jam in a certain area, takes 14 minutes to shut down, unless it's an emergency called, obviously. So we shut it down. From the material coming in at the front to coming off at the back takes 14 minutes. It's a fairly complex line. It takes 14 minutes to start it up again and run it like that. So it's half an hour lost time, effectively. Even the guys that are picking don't want that. They don't want to be standing about. So that's when the temptation to go and miss out the lockdown procedure, miss out the automated electronic switches. When you remove the guard and you remove the bolts and it cuts off. So somebody's learned a wee tactic that if they use a litter picking stick, they can put an arm over one bit and a hand under some and get it. It's trying to stop that. That's the biggest issue, because that's right at the face. And then work it back towards the technology providers. And that's an industry thing. That's not just for one person.
I also find it really interesting you saying, you know, obviously the operator is the person that sees that bit of kit most often. Is probably the person that knows how it feels, knows how it sounds, knows how it behaves. I remember being really taken aback. I work from Scotland, but for a company that's head office was in England. So when I was down there in the evening, I'd have to take a fleet car to go to the hotel. And we had a policy of before you even get in that car, you would walk around it, you'd check its tires, you'd then get in it and check that all of the stuff was working the way that you thought it'd be working, and that it had its emergency kit in the back for winter driving, for other bits and pieces, or if you broke down. And when someone first started saying that to me, I thought that's completely over the top, you know, because you just jump in my car at home and drive off. But now I get into my car and I go around my car first before I get in it and I get going. And it's been a safe place for me because I find, you know, nail in the tire. I find that I hadn't had on a winter's day screen wash in the car. It reminded me to do it, you know. So it's that kind of the person using the kit before they get in it. If they check it, go around it, and look at it, it's massive.
It's one of the forgotten plant again that I talk about. So we talk about plant and machinery. If I was in a room just now in front of an audience, I would ask a simple show of hands: how many people check their company car every single day before they drive it? Because I don't. Every day. I have a walk around about it, but I don't check every aspect of it. So I ask a lorry driver to go through a 62-point check or something like that every time before he gets into something that belongs to the company. And I fail to do it myself. The vans, recently I've implemented defect sheets for the vans. We've got 8 vans here as well. Because they're company property, they're under the company's onus, the company's insurance. So somebody should be checking it.
Same thing. And it makes you think, you know, and when you hear people saying, oh yeah, I had that car, it was making a weird noise as I was driving down the motorway, you think, what were you doing, parking it up?
And then you walk by a van and the tyre's like a rubber band because nobody thinks there's anything wrong with a tyre till it literally explodes. So the one thing I would, there's a poor showing maybe sticking up some skips there, but it's just relative to the industry that we've got in the collections. But the one thing that I would just ask everybody is to have a wee think about the things that you never think about. And that sounds a wee bit strange, but if I talk about the waste industry, I talk about a processing line, a baler, a shovel, a grab, a loader, a forklift, and a truck.
Yeah.
That's probably the things that everybody thinks about. What about the chains? What about the slings? What about the wheelie bins? What about the 1100 bin that you're asking a guy to pull out at a customer that he's been telling you for 6 weeks the brakes don't work? It rolls down the hill and he grabs it and now he's got a hernia operation to get.
Yeah.
Right. It's all the forgotten items that we need to.
On it and it tips on top of it.
And then it's that maintenance contractor. Whenever you get a maintenance contractor, we've got maintenance contractors we've worked with for 40 years. You should see me trying to get them to sign in.
Yeah, okay.
So it's those simple things that will make all the difference should something go wrong.
So having the rules, planning and preparing for what the rules should be for the right kit in the right place, and making sure that the rules are implemented, stuck to, even if you had to send someone off site and say, you're not putting foot on here. And I take it that needs, you know, senior management buy-in because I know
there's a job to be done.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Because I also know that Gordon needs to get away as well because he's operating in terms of managing 2 or 3 tasks as usual all at the one time. So, I mean, I'll have one final question, Gordon, if that's okay with you. And obviously, Switch Forum's got information. You've given some really helpful information. I know there are several WISH documents, WISH 18, for example, and a number of others which we've circulated recently. But that covers, you know, guarding, isolation, lock-off, falls, access, blockages, the use of technology like CCTV, monitors, alarms, safety belts, chutes, the kind of business as usual versus quick workaround, changing in waste, which you mentioned with the bucket issue, ergonomics, picking cabins, dust, noise, welfare, fire, storage, loading areas. I mean, that's not a task for one person to try to manage and be responsible for. That is every individual on the site. So, Here we go. We have a question from James. He must have known. He's probably holding you up because he's applying for the same tender. So he's basically, we've used check sheets now for a number of years, and they must be signed in before any plant or fleet is used in recent years. Telematics to tie the sheet and personal fobs on the CCTV fleet. So there, I guess, James is highlighting an example of having the process in place and then using the technology to be the auto nag, the control point to say you can't move from this point on unless you do this. So I guess that's a positive of technology. And I know the use of CCTV and screens and others allows stuff to be there. But I guess what we're saying as well is don't become too reliant on it, because it can make you feel that the machine's looking after you when you need to look, it's a machine. You need to look after the machine as well.
It's like reversing because there's a reversing camera and a bleeper in it. And then reversing till you hit something because the beeper didn't work. That's the false securities. It'd been interesting when they're actually with James to see the journey that they went through to go from getting somebody to sign a book to having that fully implemented and the buy-in, because that's where the challenge is, getting the buy-in.
Yeah, so I mean, he's just
it's costly.
very honestly put costly, you know. But again, the cost of ending up in court for a death through the HSE to the cost of
unlimited.
I guess it's balance, and we need to not lose sight of the idea of a false economy. And I guess the other thing is, if your kit's down all the time, it's not working, you've got that frustration of staff morale, then you're not a productive company. You're not a happy company. So the likelihood of you making money, which is tough enough to do in today's environment, you're just making the task worse for yourself. So if you had one thing to say, this is what I would advise people to do, this is the key thing I would say, what would it be, Gordon?
It has to be communication and planning.
Yeah.
So whether you're learning a new guy how to drive a machine, make sure you've put the time in before you allow them to. If it's a guy coming in to do a bit of welding, make sure you've got the systems in place, but take the time to have the communication to make sure that you're satisfied that everything's going to go first, because this will come back to you when it goes wrong. Yeah.
Wise words. Gordon, thank you so much. I know you've been very polite with us harassing you on a daily basis while you've been ill and while you've been filling in for others and not at work. And I really, really appreciate all of the time that you and Lomac allow you to give us at the Switch Forum. And I really appreciate all of the time today. If there are no other questions, I'm going to let Gordon disappear because I know he's got a few other bits and pieces he needs to do and round off. But on behalf of everyone, cheers, Gordon. Thanks for your help. Brilliant as ever. Lovely to see you as well. And we'll be posting the recording of the webinar with your permission on the Switch Forum website. And everyone who's wants to review it again can get a chance to see it. And if you think anyone else, as I would advise you, go see some colleagues in your business organization. Tell them to have a look at this video today, because I think they'll find it hugely helpful. But thanks for your time, Gordon.